We just had the opportunity to explore a couple of essential skills in this practice. One of them we often refer to as concentration. Concentration means that we are capable of bringing our attention to a particular object, that object being whatever is most relevant at this time. We defined body sensations as most relevant and practice bring our attention to that. Different people at different times have different experiences with concentration, with the ability to bring our attention to something. Notice when we're distracted and then quickly but gently bring our attention back to the focus space. Naturally, in life, what is most relevant changes quite a bit. Changes all the time. So just now I was attending to a talk that I was giving, and then I found that something else was more important, water. So I turned my attention to that, and now my attention is back on the talk. So things can change. It isn't necessarily the case that we keep our attention on one thing for a long time. But with the exercise that we just did, that is what we were doing. And that's also possible, that we keep our attention on one focus space for quite a while. Within that focus space, we were moving around. Sometimes we pay attention to this body sensation, sometimes to that. And so there's a certain amount of flexibility. But in any case, the ability to concentrate, the ability to deeply concentrate is, you could say, the most fundamental human skill. When I was in high school, I had a lot of difficulty concentrating on my homework. It was very hard for me. And so I wrote a sign above my desk. I had a desk in my room where I did my homework, and I wrote a sign that said, "You can do anything if you concentrate." And I underlined anything. You can do anything if you concentrate. To remind myself of the importance of this skill. If we can't keep our attention on a goal, then we can't achieve it. It may happen, of course. It may happen, but the thing that allows us to do the work to increase the likelihood that it will happen is our focus, is our concentration. This is the case in everything that we do. And the measurements regarding little kids, 4-year-olds, about how long they can keep their attention on a certain task is the best. There is no better measurement. There's no better predictor of how successful that child will be in every area of life, relationships and work, personal, all of this. So this skill is absolutely essential, and like any skill, if we want to develop it, we give ourselves time. We practice doing it many times. We also were attending to the skill of equanimity, the skill of allowing things to come and go freely, without resistance. And we had the opportunity to explore subtle aspects of resistance that we may have. there may have been a body sensation that arose for people here that we didn't want. Wanted a different one, not that one. This is a bad body sensation. Maybe it was an itch or an ache, pressure or pain, some sort of uncomfortable experience that we don't want. We want a different one. This is the wrong one. This is not the correct body sensation. We may notice that arising within us. And if we have the ability to concentrate to a certain degree, then we may notice that that sensation is in fact present. There it is. It is present. We've now acknowledged that fact. We noted it. We now know it is present. Okay? It's present. Very good. That's that. That's just the way it is. It's present. And then we have the opportunity, as we bring our attention to it, to notice whether fighting against it, rejecting it, trying to repress it and get rid of it, makes it better or worse. We have a chance to notice that at that moment. Because the reason that we would try to repress it and get rid of it is that we think it's going to make things better. If I fight against my experience, if I fight against awareness, then things will be better. We believe that. Otherwise we wouldn't do it. And we get to pay sufficient, we give ourselves the time so that we have the chance to pay sufficient attention to notice if that is in fact the case. Is it true that fighting a war against myself makes things better? We get to find out. Because for most people who are alive, in some way, at some deep level, we believe that fighting a war against myself does make things better. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it. And yet, here we are doing it. We believe I will attack my experience. I'll attack my awareness and try to destroy it. And therefore, everything will be better. I'll be happier. I'll live better. Make better decisions. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it. And so we have the chance, if we are able to attend closely enough, to notice the moment when a sensation arises and we react with, this is wrong, this is a bad experience. Try to get rid of this one. We notice that. And if we notice it sufficiently, then we notice what happens at that moment. Does suffering or joy, either one, increase or decrease at that moment? Does it increase or decrease at that moment? We discover that if we can attend to it closely enough. It's also important for us, along with receiving experiences, to let go of them, to move on, to move on to a new place in our lives. And we notice, as we're attending, when we let go, on the one hand, are we unwilling to let go? Are we actually holding on and not wanting to have a new life? Are we unwilling to, you could say, die in this moment? The consciousness, the awareness that we have right now, are we willing to die? On the one hand, are we willing to do that? And on the other hand, are we trying to get rid of ourselves, of how we're experiencing things? Trying to push it away and reject it. There is letting go a subtle invitation to return to the get rid of style of life, of awareness. We have the chance to explore this if we can attend to it closely enough. We attend to it, and then we explore these 2 points. In my experience, there are really only 2 reasons that we do anything. And I'm interested, I always say this, I'm interested if anyone has any more. But all the reasons that we do anything seem to fit into one of 2 categories. We either want to do it, or we're in the habit of doing it. That seems to be it. We either want to, or we're just used to it. We have momentum. Between the two of these, in general, being in the habit is more powerful. A habit is more powerful in the short term. But desire is more powerful in the long term. We can gradually change our habits if we intend to. And then we have a new habit which goes on its own. And so to create a good habit is really good, because it means that once it's developed, you're just going to do it, even if you don't want to. That's fantastic. What happens as we carefully notice the impact of equanimity or resistance in our experience, is that we have the chance to notice what I would suggest we will notice, and that is that fighting against experience, fighting against the experience that we are having, increases suffering. That's my suggestion. I'd suggest that to fight against the experience that we're having, in terms of experience, I'm not talking about fight against dangerous or unjust circumstances. I'm saying to fight against our experience makes things worse. Things get worse when we do that. If we perceive that directly, then we'll stop wanting to do it. We won't want to do that anymore. Will we be in the habit of doing it? In all likelihood, yes. We probably will be in the habit of doing that. And so we need to practice and we learn a new way. And that can take time. But if subtly at a deep level we don't believe it's the right thing to do, we don't actually want to do it at all, then if you don't have the desire to do something and you're in the habit, you don't want to do, you have A and B, you don't want to do B, and you're in the habit of doing A, well then, there you are. That's it. Your future is set. Habits, patterns are very, very powerful, and they have a lot of weight, they have a lot of power in guiding our lives. So, to pay close attention and to notice whether suffering increases or decreases at the moment of resisting our experience is very important. But there's another point which we got to explore at the very end, and that is, does resisting our experience make us more or less effective? Because a lot of the time we have that impression. I have bad desires. I need to fight against that. I need to destroy that. Well, from a certain perspective, I actually agree with that. I agree with that from a certain perspective, actually. But in this exercise, we had the chance to bring up something that we feel we should do in our minds, and then notice how we feel about doing that. Notice the feelings that arose. That awareness of what's happening, that awareness is not something to fight against. We may respond by fighting against those patterns. But the awareness of what's happening is not something worth fighting against. And this point is very subtle. It's more subtle than most of us realize. And the reason I say it's so subtle is that, in my experience teaching people, we talk this through early on in their practice, or in my practice. I also have talked this through with myself and talked with teachers about it many times. You talk it through, and it all makes sense. You say, oh yes, of course. Knowing about things actually makes you more effective. There's no reason to fight against awareness. You want to fight against circumstances. Now, those circumstances may be external circumstances. Someone's maybe attacking us. So we have two options, right? Close your eyes and pretend that they're not there. And you just have to find out, does it work? Do they continue to hit you or not? Find out. And this is actually a very serious issue, because let's face it, a lot of us actually try this method. Someone's hurting us, and we try to just ignore it and somehow believe that things will get better. We get to find out. Does it work? Does it work or not? We get to find out. And internally, sometimes we attack ourselves. Sometimes we have thoughts and emotions that are damaging to ourselves. And we can just close our eyes and say, I think if I ignore it, it'll go away. Or, more powerfully, we successfully ignore it. And then we don't even think it'll go away. We're ignoring it, remember? You can't think maybe it'll go away if you don't even know it's there. You just descend into ignorance with the assumption that that will improve things. We get, in this practice, to find out what happens when I know what's happening. How do things change when I'm more aware of what's happening inside of myself, what's happening outside of myself? What happens? Do I become more able to deal with those situations, with my thoughts and emotions, and with people and circumstances around me? Or do I become less able? We get to explore that, and I would suggest that we become more capable of that. We become more effective. And yet, we remain we believe that ignorance is bliss, that we can put our head in the sand and it'll be fine. We see this in our personal lives, and we see this in the world. We see this with, for example, environmental issues. Denial is the primary method that we're using to deal with environmental problems. We spend enormous amounts of time and energy using denial as a solution. In the same way that we use enormous amounts of energy using denial to deal with our own personal, internal issues. And the classic phrase that you hear when someone's doing this is they'll say, "Oh yes, I'll deal with it when it becomes a problem. When it becomes a problem, that's when I'll deal with it. Eventually, it'll become a problem someday. My addiction, when it becomes a problem, I'll deal with it. At some point, when it becomes a problem, then I'll start to work with this. But for now, it doesn't really seem to be a problem. We'll deal with global warming or species extinction or nuclear weapons or whatever it is. Eventually, when it's a problem, we'll deal with it. Someday it'll be a problem, maybe, and then we'll deal with it. This is the point that humanity has so much trouble with, and we're here dealing with this lack of maturity. That at the moment of being, shall I open up to the truth, or shall I descend into delusion? Something in us deeply believes in delusion. But try to remember, or if you don't remember, give it a try again. What happened as you did that, as you accepted how you felt, as you accepted what you already know, as you gain the confidence to then act according to that, is that satisfying? Try to attend to the fulfillment that arises in that. That fulfillment is deeply present and very powerful. And that is what will take us through our personal problems and our cultural problems, our global problems. That new awareness, that the being able to consciously contrast the fulfillment that comes from awareness and not resisting what we already know, and you could call it, I don't know what you'd call it, happiness or something, some kind of happiness that comes from ignoring that, shutting it down, and avoiding what we know, descending into ignorance, ignorance. We in this practice get to contrast those two kinds of experiences. We get to choose then which is more fulfilling. And the thing that's mind-blowing is that not only is acting with awareness and clarity more useful in the long term, not only is that I'd say the main indication of maturity, which then is effective in our lives, not only is that true, and that's great, that's fantastic, but we already know that. That isn't exactly mind-blowing. What's mind-blowing is the realization that it's also more satisfying in the present moment. It's more satisfying now, even before those results have come. This is also incredible, because there's a big price to be paid for ignorance, and that is a terrible sense of insecurity. Because we know. We already know. We're lying to ourselves, but you have to lie to yourself. You can't do that without knowing you're doing it. You know you're doing it. You're doing it. You can't not know it. You're actually doing it. It's an active process. And so you get a sense of terrible insecurity, which can be debilitating and can convince us, I can't do anything after all. It's better if I just ignore the problem. And then we get more insecure. And so we want to ignore the problem more. So we get more insecure. And that process can be something that we have developed very deeply, elaborately, skillfully. To come out of that, it's a deep habit, a deep pattern. To come out of that can take time. Absolutely, it can take time. Okay, fine, it takes time. Here we are. What do we have? Time. That's what we've got. That's the one thing we actually have. We have time. We don't know how much of it we have, but at least we have it. That we have. So we use it to come out and to notice a new kind of fulfillment that's free from insecurity, that has the wonder that naturally arises with awareness. Awareness has the characteristic of wonder, and is effective. Makes us more effective in solving our problems and the world's problems. So that we can ourselves face the very act of denial, which isn't just in us, it's a world problem. We're dealing with the act of denial, the act of ignorance. The act of ignorance. Ignorance, in the way I'm defining it, is an action. It's something that we're doing. The act of denial or ignorance, we face it and we resolve it. And that gives us an incredible sense of power, not insecurity, but power. That power gives a sense of deep fulfillment right now. And to deeply experience that is our path forward out of our personal issues, our own habits and addictions, and our community habits and addictions that are leading to the creation of nuclear weapons, global warming, and other major problems in the world. To connect to that directly, to directly encounter that, connect to it, and trust it, is a skill and a goal worthy of our lives. It's worthy of the brilliance that we are, the precious nature of our lives. Our lives can be poured into that. To directly experience that, to directly experience something new that we touch, that we contact, that's an overturning of normal human consciousness. It's a new way of approaching problems. It's a new way of approaching our internal and external experience. It's a new way to directly encounter that. But it's very difficult to imagine what that would be like. It's difficult to describe what that would be like. And so we have a practice. We have a practice. And how do we experience this? It's as simple as what we just did. We sit down, and for half an hour or 10 years, we say the word feel in our head every few seconds. That's what we do. I'm serious. That is what we do. And then we notice it's possible to intentionally open up to that experience. Whatever it is. It's intentional. It's possible to intentionally drop that experience, just as it is. And then we notice another experience. And we do it again, and again, and again, and again. And we find our fulfillment increases, and our ability to follow our conscience increases. And then we die. That's how it ends. Then you die. And that's all that there is to do. That's what we do. We notice things, open up, let go, do that a few times, and then you die. That's what it looks like. That's what life is. That's the progress of time. To pour ourselves into that is you see, Peace Pilgrim, who some of you know of, Peace Pilgrim, she was a spiritual teacher who's passed away now, a very interesting person. She said something so wonderful. She said, if people knew the power of a negative thought, they'd never have another negative thought. But we don't know, so we have negative thoughts. It's just because we don't know. We think that the negative thought, A, doesn't make problems, and B is the solution. We believe that. That's why we make them. So what do? We can yell at ourselves and tell ourselves to stop doing that, or we can notice very clearly, is it the case? Is it true that negative thinking is really useful and solves lots of problems? All of them, actually. Is that true or not? We can examine that. Does negative thinking make problems? Does it? We can try to talk that in our heads and come to some sort of philosophical conclusion, or we can try to have faith in Peace Pilgrim because of her deep wisdom. But I find that when push comes to shove, those methods don't work that well. The method that works is to myself experience the arising of that resistance, that descent into ignorance, and watch what's happening at that time, to see it directly, truly, honestly, fully. And that from that, I do know the power of a negative thought. And that's it. That's the end. At that point, the negative patterns are still there, but they can't continue forever. Because my intention, my desire is pulling away from that pattern. So this is our chance, this is our opportunity to, it may seem strange to sit down, say, notice an experience in our bodies, say feel, and then open up to that and let go of it, that could create a radical shift in our consciousness. But it is the case. It just is the case. I hope that you trust me on that enough to try it. But there's only one way to know for sure. That is to give our time and energy to this practice. So please, solve the problem of nuclear annihilation on this planet. Solve the problem of global warming. Solve the problem of our own addictions. It may seem impossible. It seems, why would you say these big things? It's impossible. I can't. Why? You're just making me feel bad. I can't do it. But notice that's our own reactions. That's still your experience. That's not anything inherently true in any of that. That's these patterns. that are arising, that we've learned. And because we've learned those patterns, society isn't changing. Don't you see? That's the reason that none of us are doing anything about it. Because we have that pattern of, oh, come on, don't make me feel bad. I can't do it. Well, that's it. That's the very thing to notice. Oh, wait, that was a thought. And I feel certain things. Interesting. And we get to test it. We get to test it through paying attention so that we can have a new kind of motivation. Then I can do it or I can't do it, or I'm this or that. A new kind of motivation is to notice when I fully open up to this, it's fulfilling. That's it. That's all we need. That's it. It's a total overturning of consciousness. Things are completely different after that, in a way that I know we can't imagine. So we have to practice in order to experience it for ourselves. So I'm glad that we're here together practicing, that we're throwing ourselves into this for the sake of ourselves, our lives, and each other, the world. Thank you.